Hi class, today we're going to be going over lesson 3.1, integers and absolute value. So go ahead and make sure that you have your notes directly in front of you. So our essential question is how to identify and label integers based on absolute value on a number line. So let's look at some vocabulary terms. Identifying and graphing integers. Well, we notice that on our number line that 0 is our central point. So since 0 is the center, we now understand that to the left and to the right are two different types of number values. So in this case, to the left of 0, we have our negative integers. So over here to the left, it will be decreasing in value. So we notice that directly to the left of 0 is going to be -1, then -2, -3, -4, -5, and so on. So the arrows basically tell us that these numbers are going to continue to grow negatively. So negative integers are integers less than 0. They can be written with the negative symbol. So you'll see the little minus sign representing the negative. Then for our positive integers, that's going to be on the right-hand side of 0. So to the right, we notice that the positive integers are integers greater than 0. So that means they're going to continue moving towards the right and increase in value. So they can be written with a plus sign or a positive sign. And so that just tells us that it's going to continuously increase. Now, one thing to always remember is that 0 is neither negative nor positive. It is just a value. Let's go ahead and continue by looking at a couple of examples. So in our directions, it says write an integer for each situation. So for number 1, an average temperature of 5 degrees below normal. So in this case, when you're thinking of below normal, you're actually thinking of a value that is decreasing. So it's actually getting less in value. Now, this doesn't mean that the average temperature is 0, because the average temperature could be wherever you're specifically located in the world. So in this case, they're just saying that the temperature is going to be the 5 degrees underneath whatever the normal is. So say, for example, in California, the average temperature is 72 degrees. So then if the average temperature is 72, then it'd be 5 degrees below it. So that, in other words, it's just saying that it's subtracting 5 degrees. So in this case, that below normal is just insinuating that it is a negative value. It's going to be subtracting. So this would be -5. So in this case, it's just saying that the integer for this type of problem, it would just be -5 degrees from wherever it began. And then in question number 2, we have 6 degrees above normal. So now in this case, that keyword above, it's saying that whatever the normal temperature is, and say, we're in a different state and the average temperature is 80 degrees. So then they're saying that above that normal, then you would add 6 degrees. So in this case, this would be a +6. So then it is a positive integer. So we just want to understand that there are keywords to kind of pay attention to. So when you see below, that means that you're going to be subtracting in value. If you see above, you're going to be increasing in value. Now go ahead and take a moment and turn your paper over to the other side so we can take a look at a couple more examples, and then we can go ahead and get started. Now for example number 3, we're going to go ahead and graph the set of integers 4, -6, and 0 on a number line. So in this case, we're going to want to create a number line. So we're going to draw a number line, and then we can go ahead and show that there's arrows on both sides. Now we notice that the values are going to be from 0 and in the center, so that's a pretty easy one to remember. But then we have to think about, well, what numbers go to the left, what numbers go to the right. So the numbers to the left we know are negative values. So in this case, this would be -1. Then we have our -2, -3, -4, -5, and of course, -6. Then we're going to go ahead and have our positive numbers going towards the right. So in this case, this would be +1, +2, +3, +4. So now when we go ahead and we want to graph the set of integers on this particular number line, we want to graph the specific numbers they gave us. So they gave us the number 4. So we're going to go ahead and plot our point at positive 4 because that's one of the numbers that they're talking about. Then, of course, we've got negative 6. So we're going to go all the way to the left, and we're going to plot a point at negative 6. So that was a second integer they wanted us to graph on our number line. And then the last integer that they wanted us to graph is 0. So we're going to go ahead and plot that point. So now we have 3 points that have been plotted on our number line. And that's it. Now in this bottom section, we're talking about absolute value. So the absolute value of a number is the distance between the number and 0 on a number line. So as you can tell in this example, they show us the number line with 0 in the center, then the numbers all to the left are negative, the numbers to the right are positive. So in this case, what it's saying is that when you talk about absolute value, you're talking about how far it is from the number 0, from that number line. So for the examples that they gave us the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. And then they gave you the absolute value of 5 is also 5. Because the whole idea is to understand how far is the number 5 and the number negative 5 from 0. So in this case, when we look at negative 5, the absolute value here, then we could tell from 0 it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces. So that's all you're doing. You're simply just counting the amount of spaces or the distance from that 0, how we would get to that negative 5. Then of course we do the same thing with the positive 5. So the absolute value of positive 5, you just start from 0 and then you count to positive 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it turns out it's also 5 spaces. So in other words, the absolute value of negative 5 and the absolute value of positive 5, they're both 5 because they're both 5 spaces from 0. Now let's go ahead and take a look at 2 examples. So for example number 4, we want to evaluate each expression by figuring out the distance from 0 from the absolute value of negative 4. So in this case, if I would go ahead and just draw my number line, and I have 0 as my center, then I have 1, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. So in other words, I know that all my negative numbers are to the left. So all I do is want to count how many spaces from 0 to negative 4 is it. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this case, my answer is simply 4 because I'm just counting how many spaces from 0 to negative 4 it's going to be, and it's 4 spaces, and that's the distance. Now in question number 5, this one's a little bit different because now we have to find the absolute value of each individual number, and then we actually have to solve it by subtraction. So we have to first figure out what's the absolute value of negative 5. Then we've got to figure out the absolute value of positive 2. And once we find those 2 absolute values, we're then able to figure out the difference between them. Then we subtract them. So in this case, the absolute value of negative 5, you pretty much guessed it, it's 5. Because from 0 to negative 5 is 5 spaces. And then of course the absolute value of 2 is also just going to be 2. And the reason why it's 2 is because from 0 to the number 2 is only 2 spaces. So in this case, I've got 5 is my absolute value, 2 is my absolute value, and then I bring down the subtraction sign. And now I get to solve it. So 5 take away 2 is simply 3. And that's my final answer. So just understand that finding the absolute value is simply the distance from 0, but then there are times, like in question number 5, where they expect you to find the absolute value of 2 different numbers, then they want you to solve a mathematical problem. And that's what we did here in question 5, is that we solved a problem after. All right, so now it's your time to test your ability of how much you actually understood of this lesson. So in these next few questions, you're going to answer the got it problems. So you're going to do these problems to find out if you actually understand. So make sure that if it does ask you to draw a number line, to draw the number line. And if you need to use different colors to go ahead and plot your points on the number line, do that as well. And then don't forget to go back and review your notes to make sure that you are actually doing this correctly. We will be reviewing in class the next session, so good luck, and if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to your teacher. See you to our next lesson.